tell us your name? Did you live here? Did you die here? Do you want to take a trip? Hi, folks. We are live, and things are going wonky over on Facebook. I do not know what it is. So we're trying to get all that rectified right now. You can watch us on YouTube, and I'm sharing the link over on Facebook. Dagny, if you could share the YouTube link, or did you already share the YouTube link?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, okay. In the group or just in general?
In general.
Okay, let me see here. Okay, it's not letting me. I'm gonna have to post it over in the group real quick. It's just one of those things. We're trying to figure out what's going on here, folks. Appreciate whoever's watching right now. We do appreciate the watchers and hanging with us as a live show. And I'm going into the group right now and saying technical difficulties. Please watch on Facebook.
Yeah, the fun of a live show.
Please watch on YouTube, I meant. Okay. Man. And right up until we started, we were still getting. Okay, Lynn just commented and said YouTube is working. Where'd that go? All right, thank you. Hopefully, we'll get some normal Facebook watchers over on YouTube.
We don't want normal watchers.
Yeah,
Just
the watchers,
strange ones.
the strange ones, exactly. Get some of these strange folks over here watching us on YouTube. So anyway, don't know what it is. I'm gonna have to take this issue up with StreamYard because this has happened before, and I've done it what they told me to do to fix it, and it obviously hadn't fixed it. Last week the show went off without a hitch. Our revisited show with Southern Spirit Guide 2. No problems. I don't know what's going on here. When I sent the show to our Strange Friends group, it worked fine, except that for some reason you had to go up and click the link to their Facebook page, StreamYard, and give them permission to use your name before you could comment. If not, all we get is Facebook users. So anyway, thank you for watching, whoever's watching.
At least we have the option to watch it later too.
That is true. And
I love that option. Some people are not on the same timeline, So.
Yeah. Oh, I know it, and that's the beauty of having it recording as we go. I do love the live aspect of it, though. Guess playing on stage for as many years as I have, that just kind of in my blood, and like the live performance. So we provide these shows first and foremost for you, the watchers, for your entertainment. We are not by any means, and especially today, we do not claim to be scholars or experts in any of the topics we cover. We're simply enthusiasts and storytellers who have fun with these topics while doing our best to respect individual beliefs. And we're going to have to do that today because some people don't believe in this topic that we have picked for today. But please remember the show is live. you've already been seeing that if you've been watching so far. Nothing is rehearsed or edited out later, and the only caveat is our revisited shows where I basically just cut the segment in half so we can do one show one week and one show the next, because StreamYard only allows me an hour on pre-recorded videos. So that's the only editing that I do. And sometimes if there was some kind of crazy whatever, I may cut that out. But the basics of the show are always still the same. Dagny, what'd you think of last week, our last live show, Strange Highways 2?
I can't help it. I love every single one of our shows. I mean, I don't just say that because it's ours. I say that because we're finally touching topics that I can't watch all the time on TV or whatever.
I hear
I don't
you.
watch TV, but I watch movies, and it was great. It was great. Every time
Okay.
I have so much fun watching you guys and watching us, and we got to get a lot more people watching us because they don't know what they're missing out on.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, Tim's story about seeing the tornado. Oh, wow. Driving up across the hill and seeing, I think it was Topeka, and devastation and a hole in the Capitol dome and all this kind of stuff. And then it all just disappeared,
That's
you know.
nuts, man.
And
I mean,
and then to find out that it happened like 50 years before.
I hadn't even heard of, what did you call that, time
Time slip.
time slip. I had never heard of that until you guys were talking about it. And I was
Oh,
like,
cool.
"Oh, whoa, that would be intense." I would kind of
Yeah.
like to try that out sometime. I've tried all these other paranormal things.
Yeah. Okay. Oh crap. Anyway. All right. Yeah, that would be a unique experience, but I don't think it's something that you could just go try.
Yeah. I
I
mean, where do
mean,
you find it?
well, the street. Crap, my mind just went blank. The street in Liverpool, um, where it happens all the time.
Well, next time I'm in Liverpool.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. All right. And then last Saturday, we did the last half of Southern Spirit Guide, where we were talking to Lewis Powell IV, who is, by the way, packing. He's fixing to head out on a trip to New York City. So we wish him a safe but strange journey.
Well, it'll be New York, so it will definitely give him some strange.
Yeah, I used to tell people I spent a week in New York one day.
Yeah.
The time I visited there, it was back in the mid 80s. It was an unusual experience. But it being the 80s, I had on my parachute pants and my sleeveless shirt, and I had my long curly hair and scraggly beard, and everybody thought I was Puerto Rican. I don't know. And so I just told, I said, just hang on and listen to me talk for a little while, and I ain't Puerto Rican.
I ain't.
I don't have a problem with Puerto Ricans, but I ain't one, I mean, that's so
I remember the first time I came to visit Florida, which I'm living in Florida now. I call Chicago my hometown, but oh my God, the culture shock. I couldn't understand you guys. That accent was too much for me. And now I go visit Chicago and they're like, "Oh,
what
you got a
happened?"
Southern accent. And I'm like, "Oh no, I don't. Are you serious?"
Well, at the same thing, when I left the South, I mean, I didn't leave. I just traveled during the 80s a good bit up through the Eastern Seaboard and New England and Canada, and traveled a good bit. And when I would come back home, people would say, "You lost your Southern accent." but when I was out traveling, they're like, "My God, you got a strong Southern accent." But I had enough influence that by the time I got back home, it was gone. So, or what people thought, it didn't sound as strong as it had been. But living abroad. But and I mentioned about Lewis being out. He's traveling. Tim, and I can't give you all the details because I mean, he will give it to us when it's done, but he was invited to do some special videos today, getting ready for Halloween, telling some of the creepier, scarier ghost stories in Topeka there in Kansas. And so this is from a local TV station, but I won't give you any more details than that right now. But he's out right now telling ghost stories. So he'll be back with us probably on the next live show in 2 weeks.
What is it? It's October 2nd, and
yeah.
I'm already so excited. I love Halloween. It's terrible.
Well,
a friend of mine is doing like a 30-day scratch off.
Yeah.
Like an advent calendar.
Oh. With... a different Halloween theme every day. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, if you're watching on YouTube, please remember to like, subscribe, and sign up for notifications.
Click that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.
And you notice I stuck my grandson on there at the end of it. So, all right. And we do these shows for you, the watchers, and it takes a little bit to do it. And I've been footing the bill. I don't mind. I'm not complaining. But all the help we can get would be much appreciated if you could become a patron on Patreon. Yeah, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month, and there are specials on videos on there that are not anywhere else. That's the only place you can see them. We do that for our patrons to give you a little something extra there and show our appreciation. Plus, you get some cool swag. At certain levels, you get a bumper sticker and maybe a coffee mug at a different level, a T-shirt. I mean, you get some different swag after you support it for a little while. So I support a couple of different podcasts that I listen to. So anything you can do there to help would be much appreciated. Now, Dagny and I were talking before the show started, some of the usual things that we have done in the past. We're going to skip over today, and we're going to go right into the stories because we've got some wild ones for you. So here we go again. When I was your age, I changed your diaper, said the dark-haired boy to his father. Ron looked down at his smiling son, who had not yet turned 2. He thought it was a very strange thing to say, but he figured he must have misheard him. But as a baby, Sam made similar remarks over the next few months. Ron and his wife, Kathy, gradually pieced together an odd story. Sam believed that he was his deceased grandfather, Ron's late father, who had returned to his family. More intrigued than alarmed, Ron and Kathy asked Sam, "How did you come back?" "I just went whoosh and came out the portal," he responded. Although Sam was a precocious child, he had been speaking in full sentences from the age of 18 months. His parents were stunned to hear him use a word like portal, and they encouraged him to say more. They asked Sam if he had any siblings, and he replied that he had had a sister who turned into a fish. Well, who turned her into a fish? Some bad guys. She died. Eerily enough, Sam's grandfather had a sister who had been murdered 60 years earlier. Her body had been found floating in San Francisco Bay. Ron and Kathy then gently asked Sam, "Do you know how you died?" Sam jerked back and slapped the top of his head as if in pain. 1 year before Sam was born, his grandfather had died of a cerebral hemorrhage. Now, how strange is that? Can you imagine talking to your 2-year-old kid and they're telling you all this wild stuff?
So reincarnation is strange enough. Could you imagine it being a family member?
Right. Just
those
coming back.
cases really are
Yeah.
creepy.
Yeah. Before we go in any further, if you're watching on YouTube, if you could share the link on Facebook and any of your social sites, we'd certainly appreciate it so folks can tune in. But today we are talking about reincarnation, and we're not here to, well, I'll get into that in a minute. Well, what is reincarnation? Just the word brings images of old movies and photographs of earlier times. Like this. There's some of these I looked up just before the show. Now, supposedly, Eddie Murphy's been reincarnated, or Johnny Depp.
No.
Or even Matthew McConaughey.
Huh.
I mean, that's what we think about when we think reincarnation is that somebody that lived before is living again. The subject has been broached in movies and television for decades and written about in stories for time immemorial. Merriam-Webster defines it as rebirth of a soul in a new body. That's just the basics of it. I'm sure there are more involved. Wikipedia says reincarnation, also known as rebirth or transmigration, is the philosophical or religious concept that the non-physical essence of a living being begins a new life in a different physical form or body after biological death. It's really highlighted as a tenet in some of the Indian religions, mostly Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, I guess how you say that, and Sikhism, and some varieties of paganism. And there are a lot of groups that do not believe in it, but in various forms it occurs as an esoteric belief in many streams of Judaism.
I was going to say,
aspects.
I was, during researching, I found a lot of instances they point to in the Bible.
Right.
And
right.
I didn't ever know that. And I was, raised by a minister for part of my life. I was shocked by that.
Well, I mean, some people, again, we're not here to disparage anybody's beliefs or make some people believe a different way, but some people have thought that in the Bible where it talks about being raised from the dead and getting a new body is reincarnation. Whether or not that's what the biblical writers meant, I don't know.
My
But
grandfather was a minister, and
mhm.
he never once ever referred to reincarnation. So that was enlightening to me to hear that.
Right. Well, I mean, it's because religiously it's been associated with Hinduism primarily and
Yeah,
Buddhism for so long that if you called yourself a Christian, you couldn't have anything to do with those other religions. And I know because that's the way I was raised. My father was a minister, and
yeah,
uh, and I followed in his footsteps for a while, and it was taboo to even research it.
yeah.
Um, so, like, although the majority of denominations within Christianity and Islam do not believe that individuals reincarnate, particular groups inside these religions uh, do believe in reincarnation. Some of these I'd never heard of, but the Rosicrucians, some sects of Hermeticism, Gnosticism, as well as, of course, the Indian religions. But here recently, many Europeans and North Americans have developed an interest in reincarnation. We just recently, within the last few weeks, made friends with a fellow podcaster called the show's called Expanding Reality. Um, and the first 3 or 4 shows I watched, um, they talked about past lives and what it could be. So today we're going to share some stories, and we're not here to give. Uh, what we're not going to do is enter into the philosophical deliberations of its reality of, you know, what it all entails and go into all the depths and details of it. We just want to share some stories and ask some questions.
I didn't know that some of those religions that you referred to, but I do know that the Egyptians also believed in it. Was that some of those
Right.
named?
No, I didn't name it, but that was, I mean, they're the Egyptians um, are not referred to necessarily as a religion. That was
True. Okay.
a culture. They had religion in ancient Egypt, and but they worshiped different gods at different times, depending on who was pharaoh. you know,
Gotcha.
but in those instances, yeah, that's why the kings were buried the way they were, because they believed that they would come back and take a new form.
Yeah.
But what I said, the belief or unbelief or disbelief or not believing in uh, reincarnation is entirely up to you. We're not here to convince you or persuade you one way or the other. Like we say at the beginning of every show, we are not scholars and experts. We just enjoy the stories and discussing. And and we just want to ask some questions about it. And if you have thoughts or feelings on reincarnation or a reincarnation story, please comment and let us know. We'd love to hear it and love to share it, if you don't mind. But one thing as we start, were these people actually living another life, or were they channeling someone else's memories?
That's a good question.
I mean, again, I'm not saying one way or the other, but did they actually live in a previous time and now they're rebirthed, or have they tapped in somehow across the past to someone else's memories, or is it paranormal where they're channeling someone's story? I don't know. I
Such
do
as an
not know.
animal being born with instincts. Are
Well,
those
true.
instincts the type of thing that's passed on through DNA, like memories? Is it reincarnation?
Supposedly, you hear some of these shows and they believe that everything we've learned as a species is encoded in our DNA. So just figuring out how to tap into it.
Yeah.
They believe that PR picking Oh, or are they picking up where they left off? Lynn was asking. That's a good question too. Or um, let's.
Did they have some goal to achieve and they haven't finished it, so they came back to finish? Or yeah.
Yeah. We're going to get into some of those questions here in a little bit. Agnew, you brought up this story of Jeffrey Keene.
Yeah.
Tell us about Jeffrey.
So, he was a retired fireman that later on in his life, he went to visit a a battlefield, a Civil War battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
And when he got there, he just panicked and felt chest pain and was very distressed.
Wow.
Later on, he looked through a magazine. Oh, I'm sorry. He went and saw a psychic to talk about it, and the psychic said it's possible it could be a reincarnation issue. And during the time that he was talking to him, just spouted out the words, "Not yet." Well, a little while later, wait
a minute. Did the psychic say that, or did he?
No, Jeffrey said that out of the blue with no reasoning and had no idea what that meant.
Was she hypnotizing him, or were they just talking?
They were just talking.
Oh, and he just spouted out, "Not yet."
Not yet. Yeah. So then he's
Okay.
flipping through a magazine a long time later, and it was a Civil War magazine, and there just happened to be in bold words, "Not yet." And they were in quotes. And so he read the article, and it was about a general that that's what he proclaimed to his troops just prior to another battle. But this is when he thought it was not time to fight yet, and he needed to back off his troops. Well, that spot that he proclaimed it in, and the day that he proclaimed it, was exactly where Jeffrey was standing when he had that heart attack kind of feeling on the battlefield, and he had pulled back his troops. Well, later on, Jeffrey went to the ER. I think he was 30 years old at the time, and he had jaw pain really bad. And they looked through all the diagnostics, x-rays, everything, blood work, nothing came up, and he had no idea why. Come to find out, this general had been shot in the jaw. Wow. And that was his way he died at 30 years old.
And Jeffrey was 30 when he started having
When he went to the ER, he was 30 years old.
Wow. And the general was shot in the face when he was 30.
Yeah.
That's weird.
So that was pretty interesting. He still never found out why his jaw was hurting, but it never bothered him again.
Well, I'll be.
So he feels like this general was his past life.
Well, yeah, the psychic made that connection, right?
Yeah.
Because she asked, "Hey, do you believe in reincarnation or whatever?"
Yeah.
So, but he didn't necessarily remember anything. He was just physically connecting.
Yeah, he was having connections that were throwing him off, and he wanted to find out why.
Right. Well, see, that's another case of was he actually reincarnated, or is there a paranormal connection here where he's channeling? You know, because it happened on the battlefield. We all know the paranormal is more heightened in those places like that, in battlefields where there was death and destruction.
Yeah.
So
there's a University of Virginia is doing a large scale study on children that claim to have been reincarnated.
Wow.
And one of the things that they have found along the way is that it's very, very common that they claim a violent death. And I'm wondering if that somehow triggers the memory of the past life, or if someone with a violent death is more commonly reincarnated, or it brings up a lot more questions.
That does bring more questions, you know. Does it did the like you said, the violence at the end of their life basically push them into that mode of coming into another body, you know?
Yeah.
And or um God, I mean, I can't even put words to what I'm thinking here, because um you know, because that, like the first story I read, the kid, you know, it wasn't until later on as they got into it that he actually remembered the death. So
And it's very common, supposedly, in the cultures that believe in reincarnation. It's a
well, yeah.
lot more common for their children to come up and say things like that.
Right. Which we'll
Uh,
see that in some of the stories we've got coming up.
yeah, I think that part of the thing is that when kids are saying something like that in a place where they don't believe in it, you just kind of brush them off, like whatever.
Hmm.
So they're not really paying attention.
Well, when I was a kid, my imagination went to my comic books.
Yeah.
I don't know, me and my cousins would be out on the back field or whatever playing army, but we were reenacting what we had seen in the comic books, and each of us were a different character. You know, I had no strange memories of a different life anywhere. Before we go to the next story, remember, put the banner down there at the bottom. Go to strangestuff.live. Use your code SJW for Strange Journeys Watcher 15, SJW 15, and get a 15% off. You'll see a place on the checkout page where you can input a code. I think it's down on the lower left, if I remember correctly. But anyway, I'm going to leave that ticker running and go check out some cool stuff. We just had somebody get one of our Strange Journeys logo mugs this week, saying they saw it and had to have it, and we appreciate that. Well, Ryan, a few years ago, this 4-year-old woke up screaming at 2 in the morning. Over the preceding months, he had been pleading with his bewildered mother, Cindy, to take him to the house where he had lived before. In tears, he had begged her to return him to his glittering life in Hollywood. 4-year-old, complete with a big house, a pool, and fast cars. That was so fabulous, he once said, I can't live in these conditions. Where's the 4-year-olds get this? My last home was much better. When Cindy went into her son's room that night, Ryan kept repeating the same words, Mommy, I'm so homesick. As she tried to comfort him and rock him to sleep, he was like a little old man who couldn't remember all the details of his life. He was so frustrated and sad, Cindy says. And the next morning, she went to the library, borrowed a pile of books about old Hollywood, and brought them home. With Ryan in her lap, Cindy went through these books. She was hoping the pictures just might soothe him over. Instead, he became more and more excited as they looked at one particular book. When they came to a still of a scene from a 1932 movie called Night After Night, he stopped her. Mama, he shouted, pointing to one of the actors who wasn't identified. That guy's me, the old me. I was shocked, Cindy admits. I never thought that we'd find the person that he thought he was. But she was equally relieved. Ryan had talked about his other life and had been so unhappy, but now we had something to go on. So this guy kept seeing himself as an actor in old Hollywood, 1930s. What was that? 1932 movie. He was a 4-year-old remembering things like that. And Luke, At first, Erica laughed off her 5-year-old son Luke's odd tendency to call toys and objects Pam. She was also unconcerned by his comments about having once been a girl. He would say he had black hair when he was a girl, or that he wore the same earrings as his mom when he was a girl. So, out of curiosity, Erica eventually asked Luke, "Who's Pam?" "I was," he said. "Well, I used to be, but I died and I went up to heaven. I saw God, and then eventually God pushed me back down. And when I woke up as a baby, and you named me Luke." After pressing him for more details, Luke told his mother that he had lived in Chicago, took the train a lot, and then died in a fire. After mentioning his death, Luke made a hand motion indicating someone jumping out a window. When Erica punched the information into a search engine, she discovered a news story about a fire in the Paxton Hotel in Chicago. In March of 93, 19 people died in the fire at the building, and a woman named Pam perished when she jumped out a window. Erica couldn't explain how Luke could have known about a fire in Chicago. He had never been to the city, and she had never discussed it with him. And while the haunting story of Pam Robinson could be a coincidence, it was enough to make Mother Erica believe. Now, that brings up a question that you had brought up about gender. I mean, this boy was saying that he used to be a woman in a previous life.
Yeah, let's just suppose for a second that reincarnation's a real thing. Is that how people get gender confused? I mean, that was just something I was thinking about. Like,
I've heard people say, I'm a man in a woman's body or a woman in a man's body, and I don't know if I would necessarily call it confused, but if, like you said, if reincarnation is real, this could be where that comes into play.
That's what I was thinking as I was reading. I was like, I wonder.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a possibility, not downplaying anybody's self-identification. We wouldn't want to do that, obviously. But this could be it. People have cited mental problems for, these gender issues. And I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I try to respect someone. If they say that's what they are, then that's what, that's how I treat them.
There are some native tribes that don't really assign gender until the rite of passage at, an early adolescence.
Right.
When they decide what they are, what they identify with most.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really not, and we don't want to get into political, social issues, and we won't.
No,
it'd be real easy. But it is, that's a valid question you brought up.
It just made me think about that, because I was like, well, we don't know where that's coming from.
No, we don't. And it's a thing of respect for an individual. If you choose that's your life, then I respect that. Whether it comes from reincarnation or just your choice, that's your business, not mine.
Yeah.
And that's where I leave it. But we're just talking about possibilities here today, especially with this 4-year-old boy, Luke, saying he was a woman in a previous life. I mean, if we open up the door to reincarnation, then we have to allow for that. If this spirit or soul has left one body, who's to say that it's going into the same sex body, or is it going into a tree or a tiger,
or a bug,
or a bug.
I
We
get worried
don't.
about killing bugs.
Well, when it comes to certain spiders, it's him or me. I'm sorry. I just and snakes. I don't do snakes or spiders. It's him or me.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and send you on to your next body if that's
Yeah,
what's going on here. You just get a free trip. All right. Some twins, Jillian and Jennifer. John and Florence were devastated when their twin daughters, Joanna and Jacqueline, died in a car accident in 1957. But the following year, they were thrilled to hear they were expecting again, and once again, Florence was carrying twins. The twins, Jillian and Jennifer, were born identical, except for Jennifer's birthmarks. She had a birthmark on her waist similar to a birthmark that Jacqueline had had. Remember, Jacqueline was one of them that had died in the car accident, and Jennifer had a similar birthmark to Jacqueline, and a birthmark on her forehead that resembled one of Jacqueline's scars. Now, John and Florence moved away from their old home when their daughters were 3 months old, and they told Jillian and Jennifer very little about their late sisters. But the girls seemed to share Joanna and Jacqueline's memories. They would request old toys that had belonged to the deceased girls. They recognized landmarks when traveling to their parents' former home and were inexplicably terrified of cars. Upon seeing oncoming traffic, they would shriek, "That car is coming to get us." Luckily, by the age of 5, these frightening memories mostly faded away. The girls went on to live relatively normal adult lives. However, their story is still frequently cited as evidence of reincarnation. And here's the family thing again. I mean, this was a year later. The twin girls died, and then a year later, another set of twin girls are born, and they share memories. I mean, is this some kind of psychic thing between the children and the parents? Are the spirits of those little girls visiting the spirits of the new twins? Or is it reincarnation? Who
And
knows?
bringing up reincarnation, you think of the timeline too. Does time come into play?
Yeah. Like that one we mentioned earlier, the first story. It was like, what did he
30s?
say? Well, he said, it was like, I just went whoosh and came out the portal.
Yeah.
I mean, is that it? But is it instantaneous? Yeah. Are you put in a holding pattern? Are you in purgatory? You're in heaven? Like the one little girl said she was in heaven and saw God, and then God pushed her back down to earth. I don't.
Yeah.
Again, we're not saying one way or the other. We're saying, is this a possibility? We've got some unique stories. Now, from the time he was 2 years old, a Midwestern child named Lee insisted that he had another house and another mommy. I think this story was on that video that you watched. By the age of 3, he began saying he was born on June 26th rather than his actual birthday, June 21st. Lee claimed his middle name was Coe, C-O-E, and that he wrote movies for a living and had a daughter named Jennifer. His sister asked him, "How old were you when you died?" And he promptly replied, 48. Now, his parents relayed the titles of several movies to Lee, asking if he had written them. And when they mentioned Gone with the Wind, Lee became enthusiastic. He eagerly claimed that he wrote the film Gone with the Wind. After a quick Google search, Lee's parents learned that the writer of Gone with the Wind was named Sidney Coe, C-O-E, Howard. Howard was born on, get this, June 26th, and had a daughter named Jennifer. And he passed away at 48. Now, as these details of Coe's life were unknown to Lee's parents, it's unclear how he knew them. So, are these kids connecting psychically, channeling a spirit, or are they?
That's a lot of coincidental, dead-on facts.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how do the little kids, now that's the main ones we're dealing with right now, is little kids. I think we get in some stories of some adults here in a minute. Yeah. But this one was cool. It comes from Turkey. When Karanfil was pregnant with a son in the 1950s, she dreamed that a man named Selim appeared to her with a bloody face. And then she gave birth to a boy, Sami. As soon as Sami began to talk, he insisted that he was the reincarnation of Salim Fesley, and that he had lived in a nearby village and had been murdered by a neighbor. Okay, this pregnant woman dreams of this man, Salim Fesley. The son is born. When he can talk, he says that he's come back, and he is this Salim Fesley. And that he had lived in a nearby village and had been murdered by one of their neighbors. Now, at the age of 4, this kid walked to Fesley's old village that he claimed he was and talked with the widow of the man. And he was able to recount their life together in great detail. And his claims of murder were corroborated. He had indeed been shot by a neighbor, but the neighbor claimed that it was a hunting accident. Sami, on the other hand, insisted his past self had been killed due to an argument over his mule grazing in the neighbor's field. Now, this guy kept returning to the village throughout his life, visiting the widow and the adult children. And whenever he would encounter the murderer, he would throw stones at him. The story goes on to say he didn't want to get any more violent with him because he was afraid that guy might come back, be reincarnated, and come after him.
Smart.
So he stuck to stone throwing to avoid perpetuating the cycle of murder across multiple lifetimes. But he confronted his murderer. Now, again, how do they know these things? How do they get, like you said, such detailed information about these other people?
And sometimes they're recounting details that aren't even comprehensible to their age.
Oh, exactly.
Things that don't even make sense that a child would understand or know.
Well, like the kid saying whoosh and I came through the portal.
Yeah.
At 2 years old, where did he get the word portal?
Yeah.
This next one is kind of wild. This one, skeptics can pick this one to pieces all day long, but listen at this. For his entire life, Arthur Flowerdew was haunted with inexplicable and vivid memories of a city surrounded by a desert and a temple carved into a cliff. One day, while watching a BBC documentary on television, he saw the city of Petra in Jordan. To his amazement, now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, remember the end of Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade? They were at Petra. That carved building into the stone wall, that's Petra. That's what he saw.
I'm excited you said that because I've always wondered what that was.
Well, yeah, that's Petra. And it's also a Christian rock band from back in the 80s that I loved. Still enjoy their music. They were amazing. Anyway, and let's see. To his amazement, that city of Petra matched the one in his head that he had been remembering all this time. And as Flowerdew shared his story with several people, BBC reporters contacted him asking him to put his story on television. Several archaeologists flew to Petra with Flowerdew. He recognized landmarks with ease, including sites that had not even been excavated yet. And when presented with an ancient device, I wish they'd have told what it was because I was curious after this, the purpose of which had baffled scholars for years, he offered a plausible explanation regarding its use. After seeing a guard station, Flowerdew recalled that he had died there when he was stabbed with a spear. Now, the experts that accompanied him believed his claims of reincarnation, doubting someone would be able to fake or fabricate the breadth of knowledge he displayed. Flowerdew maintained he had never studied the city previously and only heard of it upon seeing it on television. Now, while he possibly could have withheld information regarding his past research, many believe his reincarnation story. You know, that's where I said skeptics could really blow a hole in this one and pick it apart, because all we've got to go on is the man's word that he had never heard of this place, you know. And so, not that I believe everything everybody says, but if you're the only one saying it, how are we going to refute it? You know, if no one else is saying, well, I grew up with him and we talked about Petra all the time. I mean, that supposedly that hadn't happened. And, you know, unless the man is proven to be a fraud, we just have to take him at his word. But again, was he actually reincarnated? Is he channeling a spirit that was trapped there? Or is he just connecting to memories? But, which reminds me, okay, didn't mean to cut you off, Dagny.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. I just love the fact that he was describing some technology they didn't understand.
Well, yeah, I mean
that was a cool one.
That gives a little credence to his story. But again, this is one that skeptics could really blow holes in. You know, you sit there and start picking it apart, and well, he could have done this, he could have done that. We don't know, but you know, we just have to accept it. I mean, it's his personal story. Not that we agree with it or believe it ourselves. If they do, I mean, the only
irrefutable
true
evidence
and irrefutable evidence of the paranormal is personal experience. If you've experienced it, and nobody else can take that away from you. Now, if you're blowing smoke and perpetuating a fraud, that's your business, you know, and you will be found out. But if someone comes to me with a story, I'm just like, okay, you know, it's not that I necessarily agree with it, but if you're saying it, then I accept that you believe it. And that's all I need.
Something I do believe in is karma. So
what goes around comes around.
Yeah, if you want to go and tell made up stories, something will come back for you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. All right, a couple of more stories here, and we'll start asking some questions. Barbro was born in Sweden in 1954. From the time she could talk, she began telling her parents strange stories about someone named Anne Frank. Carlin claimed that she was Anne Frank and that she had nightmares of men kicking in the door of her home and taking her away. Now, her parents had never heard of Anne Frank, didn't know that she was a real person. Now, Anne Frank died in 1949 in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp after Nazis discovered her and her family hiding in an attic in Amsterdam. And they were trying to avoid persecution, of course, for being Jewish. But Carlin's parents took her to Amsterdam when she was 10 years old, and she quickly led them to Anne Frank's house with no directions, correctly identified a spot on the wall where Frank had hung photos of movie stars, and noted that the steps were different than she remembered them. All of this was enough to finally make her parents believe she really was the reincarnation of Anne Frank, and she's been writing books about her experience ever since. Now, to have those kind of details in a young girl.
I like that you bring up that it could be channeling the connection between people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think you mentioned the time thing. Could we just be connecting across time portal and connecting with somebody? Are these people mediums where they're open to a spirit speaking through them? A ghost of someone, or
is it in our
that,
DNA, or is it
yeah,
reincarnation?
exactly. We'll never answer this question, okay? But it's just cool talking about the stories. The 6-year-old Navy pilot. Now, how cool is this? In 2004, ABC News aired a profound reincarnation story about a 6-year-old boy named James, who at age 2 began to have what many people believe were spontaneous past life recalls. When he was only 18 months old and he visited a war museum, and his fascination with the airplanes increased. And he started having traumatic nightmares of a burning plane crash, and he would wake up screaming. Airplane crash, plane on fire, little man can't get out. He drew detailed pictures of the fight that claimed his past life. He signed the drawings as James 3, stating he was the third James. As he began to develop speech, James started telling his parents about his former life as a fighter pilot in the World War II Pacific campaign. He not only named the plane he flew, but also the name of the carrier, the Natoma. He named a pilot, Jack Larson, who had witnessed his death. All of these statements were verified as true facts.
Mind-blowing.
Yes. His parents later identified James M. Houston Jr. as the name of the only pilot from the USS Natoma Bay who died in the battle that James had described. Since the pilot was a junior, it was surmised that James Leninger considered himself to be James III. His parents managed to track down Jack Larson and confirmed that he had seen James Houston's plane hit and crash. They also contacted James's sister from his former life, and the sister confirmed the statements James made about their family and their father's alcoholism. She was convinced that James was her brother reincarnated. Wow. I mean, the sister believes that this little boy is her brother that died in the plane crash. Now, this one hits kind of close to home for us, Dagny. Mary was shocked when her 4-year-old son Charlie said, "I died once and it hurts." It all began when Mary took her daughter and son to a cliff diving performance, and on the way back to their car, Charlie blurted out, "I died once." Mary thought he said dived and asked him when he had dived. Young Charlie quickly corrected her and said, "No, I died once and it hurts." Mary asked how he died, and he replied that his leg was badly hurt. Over time, Charlie's story was pieced together through these conversations. In his past life, he was born an only child named James Kello from San Francisco. When he was in his 20s, Kello was a naval officer and served on board a warship. The ship was bombed and exploded. James and 3 other men made it onto a lifeboat. When they got to shore, James dragged the only surviving crew member onto the beach. James fell onto the beach and died. Mary decided to take Charlie to visit the decommissioned USS Alabama. You know where that is, Dagny.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
Having misheard the name of the ship. She didn't find James Kello on the ship's roster, and the guide told her that the Alabama was never hit, but the USS Arizona was. While there, Charlie scooted about the ship as though he were a seasoned sailor. Later, his mother began researching the USS Arizona, lost during the attack on Pearl Harbor. Eventually, she was able to check the Arizona roster and found an officer, James Kello, from San Francisco. These were verified in other aspects of Charlie's story, including the recovery of Officer Kello's body and those of the men in the lifeboat after the Arizona was struck with a Japanese torpedo bomb. Of course, the bomb hit the ship's magazine and exploded on December 7th, 1941, during the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. And the ship is still lying at the bottom of Pearl Harbor and the USS Arizona Memorial just out onto the water just above the ship's hull. I mean, these people have details that they should not know. You know, are they remembering something that they experienced, or are they connecting with somebody across the years? And just some questions that we've been asking all through the show today. But Dagny had written a bunch of these down, and we've already gone over a couple of them. Does the timeline we know apply, or are you reincarnated at any point?
Yeah, I wonder, do you sit there for a while? Do you come straight back? Some of these people are claiming lives that were, 100 years ago or so, and then some are claiming lives that were just lost.
The twins a year later.
Yeah.
So, and then you brought up another thing in that with the timeline. Are we, if reincarnation is real, because we are the only beings that operate inside of time. So if we're pulled out of this body and we're outside of time, do we go into a being in the past, in the future, or to another location, another dimension?
Wow, I hadn't even thought about going into the past. Good point. Even though I thought about the timeline, I hadn't thought of it that direction.
Well, I mean,
that's interesting.
Well, we would be out of time.
That makes sense. It makes sense.
Well,
My mind is so fixed on time,
Well, we all are. I mean, that's the way we're raised. We function according to time. I mean, everything we do is dictated by time, and we can't change it. We can manipulate it to some degree by focusing on things that make time slow down for us, but all that is a perception. Or like if we're at work and the hours are droning on, that's our perception. Time is moving at the same speed it always does, and which, in my opinion, is the speed of light. And though I don't know why I think that, it's everything.
Part of your thinking.
Well, everything is connected. I mean, if time is moving, light is moving, it's all moving together. But anyway, and you put, does reincarnation happen across species? You mentioned a while ago bugs and things like that. Now, and again, I didn't research this. I'm not an expert or scholar, but I have heard that some Hindu beliefs is that if you wronged somebody or didn't do the right things or whatever, you could come back as a lesser being, an animal or an insect, and start all over again climbing the ladder.
And with that belief, as you were saying, you kill a spider, I swear I have the hardest time with killing a bug, because I have always just had it in my mind that what if, what if this is a person, or a soul, And it's like, well, if you were brought back as a lesser being because of the bad things you did, supposedly, well, maybe it's not so bad to put them out of their misery in the terrible body.
Yeah. Go ahead and send them on to their
kinda
next one.
deserve it.
Yeah, well, right. You got this coming to you.
Yeah, the karma
Well,
comes back again.
yeah, we'll go ahead and send you on to your next incarnation. Yeah. All right. You're a wasp. Now you're going to come back as a rat. I don't know. We're going to go ahead and take you out of this one. And we've already talked about the gender issue. What about you'd put DMT? Is that a hallucinogen?
It is, and it's naturally occurs in our brain, and we have found that it is in everybody's brain, but we don't.
Oh, yes.
And it only is released the moment we die, and we still don't know why or anything. However, they think that it may be what we see when we have near-death experiences. It might be a reaction to that DMT being released.
Could be.
They have found that every living organism has some of that in it.
That's cool. I didn't know that. I mean, I may have heard that. I was listening to a podcast some weeks ago about near-death experiences, and I don't know where a near-death experience would connect here, but that's something that we've mentioned about doing a show. So we'll save the NDEs for another show because people have some weird stories
about that one.
Yeah, and there's some cool stories out there for that because
sure.
Those of you that's watching, that's what we focus on, the stories, not necessarily the meaning behind it. Yeah, we can discuss the meaning behind it, but we're here for the stories. All right.
And they say that when you die, a lot of people claim that they see a light.
Right.
And that's another one of the questions I had was, is that light triggered by the DMT release? Is that light you're starting to go through the delivery process of being born and you're seeing the light in the other side? Was it a portal? Was it?
You're right. What is it? I mean, is it a portal? People have equated it to the angelic light or heavenly light. Move to the light is in heaven. But you're right. Is it a portal? If you believe in reincarnation, is that light the portal to your next life?
Or is that the delivery room lights that you're seeing?
Yeah. Where was? That was. We talked about the podcast we've recently become friends with, Expanding Reality, and they mentioned that on one of their shows. This person says that's exactly what it was for that person.
I'm channeling them.
I guess so. That as they were dying, they saw the bright light, and the next thing you know, they're popped out into the bright lights of the delivery room.
Cool.
So, but
I really like some of the subjects they cover on that show.
Yeah, and the thing that's wonderful about them, I mean, so far the ones I've seen, it's just one-on-one with a special guest, and they're talking about their life and experiences, and you get some great stories. Which it's a totally different format than what we do, but it's unique. And folks, check it out if you're watching Expanding Reality podcast. They drop 2 or 3 times a week. But the several shows I watched did talk about these folks and their past lives and experiences and things like that. But they actually, I hate to say this because it sounds like I'm kind of dismissing our show, but Expanding Reality is a little more cerebral. It's a little on the intelligence scale. You got to make sure you're up to date on your Webster's dictionary and esoteric terminology. So it's a really unique show to watch. But again, we focus on stories. They focus on people's personal experiences. They interview these different people, so it's a good podcast to listen to.
Well, each show is different, just like each person's different. And
That's
thank
true.
God, or this world would be really boring.
Yeah, yeah. And I got to talk to this guy. He's built his own guitar, so I got
Yeah.
he has a couple of them hanging behind him in his studio, and I'm like, I want to talk to him about guitars. But old souls. You mentioned old souls. We've described people as that person's got an old soul. We say it mostly about children.
I've been told that my whole life.
Yeah.
Even when I was young, everyone were. That's where I heard the term. Is people used to say it to me all the time.
You got an
And
old soul.
it's always made me wonder if reincarnation is real.
Well,
I haven't made any decision about it, but because when I was just starting to talk, which I started talking very, very late,
yeah.
I started describing things to my mom that, how to use plants for medicine, how
Hmm.
to, like this plant can do that, and this, and, when the cat was sick, I was holding the cat and I said, well, I can fix this, and I said my home is the Amazon rainforest and that I used to be a medicine man. And I have felt my whole life that my bucket list is I need to stand in the Amazon rainforest and look up at the canopy, and that will be my moment of feeling home for the first time. But I don't
That's
know where
you.
that comes from.
Yeah, that's unique. You say that. Over 20 years ago, um, I went through a personal. Some people would call it a nervous breakdown, whatever. But I ended up on St. John Island in the Virgin Islands, and had never been there in my life, and not even intended to go there. If you remember our Angels show, I shared my story of the sailboat experience. But when I arrived in St. Thomas, we spent the night on St. Thomas, and then the next day we took a ferry over to St. John. And I got off the ferry, walked the dock to the beach, turned around, walked in the sand into the water about up to my knees, and I had that exact same feeling. I
That
am
home,
home. I am home. And that's the only way I could describe it. And I've never felt that anywhere else. I
I've
felt
always
that,
felt this little hole missing
yeah.
that.
Well, I only the only caveat I make to that feeling of home is that was with a place, and I've felt it. I've told Lynn this before. She spent 15 years waiting on me. I spent 15 years looking for her, and when we finally got together, that connection was made with a person. Finally,
That home feeling.
yeah, that this is right. This is the connection that I've been looking for. But like I said, she was waiting. I was looking. I was the one that screwed up in all the other relationships that I regret. But
You were learning.
it was, yeah, my
It was for
luggage.
learning purposes.
Yep, and it was luggage that I carried. And some of it I have gotten rid of, but it molds us and makes us into who we are today. But yeah, when I stepped into that blue green water of the Caribbean there at the dock there in St. John, that was the only way I could describe it. It was home. Now, was that a previous life? I don't know. I'm not saying that I feel that I was that I'm a reincarnation of an island dweller, but which
But
I'm
where did
very,
this thing come from? Yeah.
yeah, I'm envious. If I was like, why can't I,
Yeah,
if my
way.
previous self lived there, why can't I live there?
I've heard it's gorgeous.
It is. I mean, any tropical place. We've been watching the new series Fantasy Island, and they've got all those beach scenes and palm trees and stuff, and it makes me miss St. John.
When I
Uh,
flew to the Bahamas when I was 16, I had never seen anywhere. I came from Chicago. Uh,
oh,
I had been in many states as a military child, but
right.
we flew over on a little puddle jumper from Miami to the Bahamas, and you could see the sea creatures in the
Yeah.
water from the plane because the
Wow.
water was
Yep. It's
so
so clear.
crystal.
Yep.
It was
It was the same thing.
I was speechless. It was amazing. But sorry about the off
Yep.
topic.
That's okay. Um, Now, I never uncovered anything about children knowing languages as they um,
Yeah, I
that
wondered
shouldn't
about that.
know. I never came across anything like that. But we have mentioned deja vu. You know, could that be what deja vu really is?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Now, I have experienced deja vu, and we've talked about doing a show on it.
pretty sure
But
most people do.
yeah, but I've experienced deja vu that I was in a restaurant one night with my dad. We had picked him up at the airport, and so it was always like a little tradition. If we went to the big city to pick up my dad from an airport, we went out to eat. And there was another man there, and for some reason, I stood up and I was standing behind the people seated at the table. And I looked over, and across the table was this old man, and I knew immediately that he was going to ask me if I played basketball because he said I have the reach for it. I knew that because I had dreamed it. I remembered a dream I had had just a couple of days before. And sure enough, as I looked up, the old man said, "Hey, son, do you play basketball? Looks like you got the reach for it." And I was just shocked. And I said, "Yeah, I play a little bit or whatever." Uh, and so I've experienced deja vu from time to time, but never equated it with reincarnation, but that's always a possibility. Um, you know,
Or again, are we connecting with a different force in our
hmm
heads, like with other people, and maybe the timeline's different, and we
yep.
did experience that before, but now we're going back to a different day. I don't
hmm
know.
Well, and you had mentioned some prehistoric graves have been found where the bodies were buried in the fetal position. Could that be because they believed that they were going to be reborn?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, all religions have the promise and the expectation of life after death. That's the whole point of every religion is a life after death. But is it as some people believe that we come back and keep trying till we get it right, or is this it? And are we just connecting with someone in a previous life? Are we connecting across the years through a time portal? Are we connecting with a spirit that is still connected here? And are we channeling? What do you think, Dagny?
I think I have way too many questions. I also think that, they always say that what we know in this world
Mhm.
is only a percentage of our mental capacity. Then there's the things that we know that we don't know. But then there's that
Yeah.
huge part of the pie of everything we don't even know we don't know. So
Yep.
we're tapping into some questions way over there.
Yep. All right. Hold on just a second.
Oh, my ice cream truck.
That's kind of creepy. In the background, as we're talking about all this weird stuff, you hear the ice cream truck.
That would definitely make a really good creepy intro sound.
Yes, it would. I think I've got that somewhere. Okay, guys, in 1 week, we'll be revisiting again. Our next SJ Revisited show will be part 1 of The Black Hat Man.
Now, real quick, if you
Uh,
want to research any more,
yeah.
the University of Virginia has about 2,300 cases of children reincarnated that they've interviewed.
Wow, that's cool.
So
there you go. There you go. All right. The University of Virginia, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's all kind of stuff out there, folks. Just do a Google search and you'll find some of the same stuff we did. And we just wanted to share some of the stories with you today. Like I said, in 1 week, SJ revisited the first part of The Black Hat Man, where we tell some creepy stories of these shadow people that wear hats. Don't know why they wear hats, but they wear hats. And then in 2 weeks, our next live stream will be, this is the plan right now. I was planning on hoping to get some special guests. One has dropped out. I haven't heard from the other yet, but we're hoping to have Jonathan Odom from Alabama Paranormal and Bigfoot with us to talk more about some more Bigfoot sightings, how big the foot to, and be looking for that in 2 weeks. I hope he can make it, because the last time we had him scheduled last year, he had a family emergency came up just before the show, and Tim and I had to just tell Bigfoot stories on our own, but we had a good time anyway. But it's that time, folks. Thank y'all for watching. Is there anyone here with us? Did you hear that? Can you tell us your name? All right, guys. Thank y'all so much for being with us. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.